Welcome back to the AEC Hive, where we're talking about innovation in architecture, engineering, and construction. I'm Ralph Montague, Director at ArcDocs and co-founder of the AEC Hive. I'm joined by my fellow co-founder, John Egan. John, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi everyone, this is John Egan, CEO of BIM Launcher and co-founder at AEC Hive. Looking forward to today's discussion.
Well, today we're in Finland and we're very excited to be speaking to Jero Juujarvi. So I hope I've got that right, Jero. It's fantastic to be able to speak to you. You're a BIM coordinator at a company called Create. You're also a founder of InfraPioneer Group. You're also an author of a best-selling book called BIM Kit. So we're very excited to be talking to you and finding out more about what you're doing. Just to get started, would you maybe give us a bit of your background, where you've come from, what you're currently doing at the moment, and then we could start talking a bit more.
Sure. Firstly, thank you for inviting me here. It's great to be joining in this podcast. And a little bit about the background. So, how to say, the easiest way to explain is that I'm not from the construction industry. Like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I first got in touch with infrastructure construction. Like before that, it was IT and sales and so on. But then when I started selling this kind of software SaaS product for construction industry and started to learning machine control systems and this BIM and a lot of different things, it was quite fascinating that it felt like the construction has become more like a video game. It's like you have the virtual one and then you are like building it on the site exactly like in the virtual world. And that really intrigued me, and that was the point where I decided that, hey, I really want to go as a main contractor, work there and see the world on that side. And really been working on now a little bit over 2 years in Create as a BIM coordinator. So basically going to our different projects around Finland and really putting all the effort to get that BIM utilization as far as possible. So different BIM-based tools or work practices and processes and implementing those so we can utilize different new technologies as much as possible on sites.
Fantastic. And Create is a traditional construction company or a design company? Just give us a little bit.
So it's a full main contractor for construction only. So we don't design anything. We subcontract for the designer if we have that type of a project. But we focus on construction and especially infrastructure construction. So not buildings or anything like that, but the roads, tunnels, rails, bridges, foundations.
And just tell us a little bit about InfraPioneer Group. Like what is that about?
Yeah, sure. So as I told earlier that my background is from IT and like software development, and along that road I had been on couple of different industries before. And when I stumbled on the construction, frankly it just felt really weird that it's a common culture that people think the simplest practices or simplest utilization or tricks how to make things efficient is the trade secrets, and everything is super secretive processes that are like the competitive edge. And I find it funny because it's really like, okay, yes, you can save 20,000, 50,000, maybe even some 100,000 on these methods, but those methods are quite simple and everyone can really figure them out. It really is not something that is a secret. Maybe for the couple of the first projects, but after that competition will understand those as well. And that culture of trying to protect something that is not really worth of protecting is why I wanted to start building the InfraPioneer Group. So mainly the InfraPioneer Group it's like a counterculture for that. It's more focused on that, hey, let's put our brilliant minds together and figure things out much more clear and build together manuals and processes and different utilizations of these new technologies, so everyone can benefit from these things. Because again, it's like before when I was tool vendor side, it felt really funny that the clients are trying to protect all these small things, but then the vendors are telling all these good findings with the competition, because again, they are selling the product, and of course they want to make sure that everyone can get most value out of their product. So again, it's similar effect on those, and that's why it's what I have been working, I think now 3, maybe more years on InfraPioneer to really build this kind of culture and group that everyone is working and sharing and, well, putting the best minds together and bringing something new for everyone.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I suppose it's a little bit of what we're trying to do in AEC Hive in creating a community where people can share ideas about better ways of doing things and innovation, as we call it. Because, like as you say, if everybody thinks their little idea is not worth sharing, then all you've got is your little ideas. But as soon as you begin to bring all these little ideas together and begin to share them, well, then something big happens, and everybody can benefit from, sort of big changes that in productivity or efficiency or anything like that, much more than little changes that your small idea might bring. So it's a fascinating thing.
Definitely, I think it's things are really changing fast especially in construction industry in that way that it's not anymore that every really valuable employee or persons in a business knows a couple of secrets and that's why they are so invaluable, but it's more moving towards that the companies who can adopt these new technologies as fast as possible will win the competition. The change is also like a big hassle and big thing is going on in the construction, because now it's not anymore the old world that was last 40 years, but now it's more that, hey, how we can better change management and how we can really improve our processes as fast as possible to be competitive.
As a main contractor, obviously you're sitting in between a process. There's a client that wants some infrastructure. They'll go to some designers and they'll come up with some design, and then it gets to a contractor who then has to implement that design, and then it goes on to somebody who's going to manage that infrastructure asset and maintain it for the future. So are you finding it, I don't know what it's like in Finland, but obviously in Ireland where we are, there's still a big disconnect between all those different groups. Designers sometimes don't see the necessity or need to produce information in BIM because they have traditional ways of doing that, and often the contractors don't have any influence on those early stages to make sure the information is produced in a way that's useful to them. I mean, is that the same idea in Finland, that you have this big disconnect?
Yeah, I mean, of course there has been, and there still is, and in the future there will be this kind of like silo-based thinking that, okay, there's the design phase where there's only designers, and then there's the construction phase where there's only construction, and then the interface between those different silos don't really communicate so well. So designer thinks he will make good plans that can be used to build what he has designed, but then when it goes to the main contractor and looking those designs, was it then BIM or then just basic CAD drawings, that doesn't give the information that we need, and that kind of disconnect is it's a big problem, and it makes a lot of external issues during the project as well. But I think like what I have been following, like visiting the Central Europe and elsewhere, the sites, I think it's like hats off to the BuildingSMART Finland and BuildingSMART International for really pushing forward this common standardizations of IFC, or then in Finland we have for infrastructure and earthwork we have InfraBIM, And these kind of like requirements where there's main contractors, there's designers, there's clients participating on these workshops and planning together that, hey, what should be the requirements to order this type of projects, and then building this kind of like manuals for those. It really has helped the effort that now most of the projects that we get usually have all these BIM models. They are maybe 60-70% on good quality. That doesn't require so much refining or editing to have a good quality BIM models, and then we can directly take it to the machine control systems or GNSS equipments or our BIM-based software. So it's really has come a long way from there to this day, and I think that's something that in the future it will go more global, this kind of like mindset, if the BuildingSMART International or someone else is really pushing as well as hard implementing this.
Yeah.
And I think that's something like something that like our own governmental agency, who is the client of all our highways in Finland, has done. Why in Finland the BIM adoption and utilization in construction is so huge is only because of the government has come and make mandatory requirements for construction that, hey, this kind of technologies has to be used, and there's a little bit bonus if you do this. So it has really rapidly changed that. Now I think maybe 30% of or 30% of budget of infrastructure construction in Finland is done without BIM, but everything else is very heavily BIM based.
That's fascinating. That's a really high percentage. That's one of the interesting things about the Nordic countries, have been quite advanced for many years. Maybe it's just because you're so north of that people don't hear so much about it, because like in Finland, in Norway, and even Sweden and Denmark, like these requirements from government have been quite advanced. Like I think is it since 2007 it was almost mandatory.
It's quite many years already.
Yeah, so that's brilliant, and it's great to hear that there's such a high percentage of the uptake. Another interesting point you made in your introduction was you recognized this relationship between the virtual and the physical. Yeah, and like a game, you called it like a video game, like a video game, and that was interesting, and was interesting in your thoughts on how technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, gaming technologies can support construction.
Yeah, I mean, I have been following on the robotics and also the IoT technology for a couple of years now, and it's something that, because the hardware has become so cheap and easy to develop software on top of IoT devices, I think there's so much opportunities to bring new tools and new like horizontal product markets inside the construction, because all this new available and cheap hardware and software that we can utilize on. And that's why like the machine control system is a perfect example on that. When we take the virtual and the excavator driver doesn't anymore use any surveyors made markings, but he can just watch his tablet and see how deep he needs to dig, and when it's at the correct cut level, then he knows at the 3 centimeter accuracy that, okay, this is where the water management pipe goes, or this is the bottom of the road, or so on. So I think it's this kind of like gamification and bringing the virtual into the site. Of course, there's a lot of big challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities. And it's something like I have been playing around with the augmented reality technology a lot on sites and trying to find good applications for them in our sites, but it's still too visual, so to say. We are talking about BIM and we are talking about the 3D models and the metadata. The newest startups that come in AEC industry, they are really focused on those things. But I think those things are not everything that, especially for construction needs. There's a lot of information that we are still putting on PDFs and Excels and so on, but the work and the project happens on the site, not in the office. So I find it really weird that we are still not there, that we can just bring the whole project office to the site with AR glasses or some other way to really make this kind of like game-like, so to say.
If you think about construction sites, they're also training grounds, if you like, because young people are working, on construction sites, and they have a senior or an older person supervising them, and obviously they're doing work, but at the same time, the more senior person is trying to teach the younger people how to do something, and so they're learning on the job, if you like. Obviously, they do some learning outside of the project, but a lot of learning is taking place on the projects, and this interaction between senior people with knowledge and junior people that are trying to get the knowledge, and this oversight. Like at the moment, a lot of that interaction is physical. So there's a person who's a supervisor, there's the younger person, and they have to be at the same place, and he's teaching them how to do something, like lay a pipe or lay a brick or do some carpentry. But of course, it's very difficult to scale that because there's only two people and they have to be there together. With AR, I've been thinking about this a lot, is you could put glasses on the younger person and the older person could be sitting in an office with 10 young people with glasses on and interacting with many people and imparting knowledge and seeing what they're seeing what they're doing and instructing them without the sort of one-to-one relationship. Those are interesting things. And just how far have you guys gone with machine controls and so, like you've spoken about excavating? Is there other things in terms of placing rebar, concrete? Like how far have you taken the use of machine controls? And
I mean, there's still a lot of manual work. Tools have grown a lot, and we use different technologies like drones and point clouds and machine control systems, and then different BIM tools to track the schedule or quantities or the progression of the projects and so on. But I think the big challenge with all this adoption is that, well, we all know that AEC industry is quite conservative industry in a sense that the digital adoption that many industries has faced from 2000 to 2010 hasn't really been so well adopted in construction itself. Like even some people have challenges with even using computers, so it's the adoption and trainings are bit of the challenge, I think, in all of the construction industries, because we have very heavily focused on the manual physical labor, and maybe with some tools like manual tools that we have used. And now it has changed more of the guided work, that we have different technologies that will tell us more information what we need to operate on the site. For example, I think the big change also has been something very simple, like GNSS receivers have become so easy to use and utilize that now foremen and even the site managers are using it when they go on the site visits. So it's not anymore just surveyor doing all the markings and going there, but now foremen don't need to wait anyone to get that information that, okay, I know there's a cable line we need to build, but there's also now existing cables. What kind of like work planning do I need to do to get this solved? And only thing now he has to do is just pick up the GNSS receiver and go to the site, and while he's checking that where every cable is and where the new one is built, then he can on the side tell the workmen who is building it that what they need to do and so on. it's still like, I think the digitalization is taking shape, and it's kind of like still a big bottleneck for construction industry. But I think that's something that because the whole industry comes from very different experience than almost any other industry itself. So that's why the adoption is much more slower and a little bit more difficult.
Like, you make a good point there. Like, the devices that are available are not useful on site. So you can't walk around with a computer on site. Like, you need different types of devices. And you need things that more people can use. If you think of banking, for instance, most people can use those machines that give you the money from, we call them a hole in the wall in Ireland with the ATM, the automatic teller machine. So, if that's a machine, that's a computer, and most people can use it, or most people can use a phone. Just about everybody nowadays has a smartphone, and most people, not everybody, but most people can know how to use those. And so the devices are just designed to be easier for most people to use. And maybe there's just not enough thought going into what sort of devices do we need for people on site. What do you see as coming in the near future as going to change the relationship on site with information, and especially digital information, in terms of devices?
That's a good question.
What are you excited about?
Need to look.
Oh, well, what's exciting for you at the moment? Like, what are you investigating, or what are you, as a company, what are you looking at and saying, this is going to be changing?
I think what you spoke earlier about the AR and giving guidances through those lenses to the new worker on the site. I think that's something that will revolutionize the industry itself in construction, if that can be more easier, because I think there's a lot of new technologies emerging that we have. The CAD and BIM based designing has really moved more parametric or algorithmic based designing with Grasshopper or Dynamo, so we can create content or enrich content very easily. And then the AR technology itself has also a lot of potential in the with the sensors and with artificial intelligence to find and scan the grounds. Like, I think Pix4D and can't remember the another one. A smaller company has this kind of app for the mobile phones that they can just take videos, and then it makes as-built images or 3D models. It's not accurate, but it's for visual purposes. And I think
Are you sure it's not the iOS?
Yeah.
I think iOS have an app that now do that.
Yeah, it's a LiDAR technology. And
it's been interesting because some you've seen glimpses like Daiquiri, the helmet with the AR, which eventually I think closed down, and even the Google Glass project didn't go anywhere. Microsoft Hololens has really struggled to gain traction. It's they seemed quite promising at the time, but they just don't seem to have found a real life application.
Yeah, and
yet. Not, it might still be coming, but it's
true. And I think that's something that I wouldn't keep my breath in, at least for now, for the AR. It's really interesting. There's a lot of potential, but again, the technology isn't yet ready for widespread adoption. But that's something that, of course, just need to follow up the market, that when someone finds good adoption. But if that's the ideal level of new technology that everyone would want, if that would work, then the lower level of less less potential, but provide similar value would be those LiDAR technologies with iOS, and then the big 4D scanners and all these things. And I think that's something that is really going really fast in construction industry, that we are finding more ways to bring the information in front of us and then collecting the information in front of us to quantity, to quality, and to provide for the client or someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big change that is, at least at the moment, is happening. But it's still quite sound of crickets that there really hasn't been good applications for connecting all these details together and provide a solution that fits for the purpose so well.
Yeah. And do you think maybe some of that is that the quality of information is still quite low, still quite poor, and so you mentioned there earlier that there's still a lot of information that's embedded in PDFs and Excels, and it's not in a format that can be streamed to site. Like a lot of work needs to be done on a PDF anyway, but even an Excel to get it into data which can be pushed to machines or devices, and there's just no time for that translation. And that, so you could say that if somebody gives you a PDF, it's poor quality data. It might be very good. It might be a very good PDF, but the only way to use a PDF is to open it on a screen and read it with your eyes. Like it's not from a data point of view. It can't be pushed to the internet or anything like that. And even if somebody gives you an Excel, it might have very good data in it, but it's in a format that has to be opened on a desktop. So some work needs to be done to make it useful. That's just my thought, that maybe at the moment people aren't thinking about the quality of data. They're more focused on information in its traditional forms.
Yeah, you brought really good argument or good point. I think that's there has been BIM blockchains, there has been a lot of digital tools and different ways to analyze or collect the data to make it more like computer readable, and also to make it more processable by computers. But I think it's still like in normal construction project, and if we go to the bigger projects, there's 1 or 2 persons full time just writing PDFs and Excels, and that's their job. And I think that's a lot of information and documentation that you need to do, but there really hasn't been, at least at the moment, what I know, there really hasn't been like good solutions for that. It has always come back to that it's PDFs and Excels, but then the distribution or access is different.
I was going to say, John, this is probably a good point for you to come in, because that's effectively what you're doing, is trying to connect people and these processes at probably what you would say is the lowest level at the moment, which is the sharing of those PDFs across different systems. What do you think is the challenge of facing the industry in terms of getting better data to site?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to interoperability, and the interoperability of the systems that these various different stakeholders use to access their information. I think that the tools are currently present to create workflow automations between these various different tools. And when you look at each of these tools, they have features that are specific to the individual stakeholders that they're actually serving. So, for example, your design teams might be working through BIM 360, and your site teams might be using Procore, specifically because they're premium features for each different user set. What's really interesting for me is obviously the integration piece. But I think that what's really interesting from Jero's point, and one thing that I picked up almost immediately and agreed with you, Ralph, that Finland have had, a really great track record with pushing digital adoption of BIM in, within their nation, and then obviously up around the region, incorporating with neighbouring countries. And that Scandinavian region, I think that they've always had a really good reputation for digital construction. And, even from the days where I was creating generative algorithms, the guys in Denmark and their PhD programs were really setting the bar there. So that was always impressive. So as Jero was describing earlier, he works in the infrastructure industry for quite a prominent general contractor. And what he mentioned was that, sorry to be talking about you here, Jero, as if you're not in the room, but I'm just giving my analysis on the situation. Was what he mentioned was that the adoption of BIM has been largely, very successful, and specifically in the infrastructure industry over the past couple of, I think the last 5 to 10 years, let's say. And that is because of the adoption of open standards, which are, generated by BuildingSMART International and the different BuildingSMART chapters, such as BuildingSMART UK and Ireland, BuildingSMART Finland, and the other chapters that are around the globe. I think that what it comes back to is that, those open standards that are developed on behalf of the infrastructure industry. I've been reading recently about the rise of standardization and interoperability standards in the telecommunications and mining industries. And they've followed a similar pattern, where specifically in the telecommunications industries, they've developed a framework that enables interoperable software and business processes. And this platform has given a common stage, or a common place for all telecommunication providers across the globe that adopt this standard and use this framework. It gives them the tools that they need to be able to innovate on top of these open standards. And I know that the infrastructure room is only relatively new in the scope of BuildingSMART, but what I'm really interested to ask Jero here is, I suppose there's two questions there. What innovations have you seen as a result of standardization of interoperability technologies in infrastructure? And do you think that infrastructure is doing anything particularly better due to perhaps the influx of standards compared to architecture, engineering, construction sectors?
Yeah, really good questions. I would say as the standardization has really much focused on the requirements of BIM designing, and then requirements of utilization, or how to say, interoperability. Close enough.
Yeah, connectivity, that's a nice word.
Yeah, that's the easy one. So then the standardization focused on that the BIM models and the formats that it's built, and the structure is fitting for different equipments that is existing. But also this standardization has made a really good foundations for the new tools. I think the new tools such as InfraKit or Trimble Connect or many other different softwares has allowed them to utilize or read and visualize and then take the documents forward when there has been this kind of standardization, how it is structured and what kind of metadata there should be and so on. It makes the software developer work much easier. And I think that has been why there has been so many startups that has started off with BIM visualizations and then accessing that metadata to understand the designs much more better, and then taking it to the different directions from there.
Well, I was going to ask, why do you think it is, Jero, that somewhere along the line, so you've got designers who are thinking and producing BIM, and then somewhere along the line, somebody's bringing it back to a PDF and an Excel spreadsheet. And then when it gets to the operations, it's coming back to BIM. Like
the simple answer, you cannot rubber stamp the BIM model.
So
no, I mean,
so an innovation that the industry needs is a digital rubber stamp. Is that what you're saying? That's the innovation that we're really looking for.
But I think that's something the more popular and widespread BIM and the standardization of it gets, the more we are leaving the PDF. But again, that transition, who knows how long it will take. It's between of those two different worlds from at the moment.
Can you talk to us a bit about some innovations that you're seeing in the infrastructure sector that perhaps are not present in the architecture, engineering, construction sectors? You mentioned InfraKit and Triple Kit. Can you talk specifically about the new features that have come along with those products, and perhaps some talk about the features belong to new startups that have been built on top of these common interfaces enabled by BuildingSMART standards?
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest changes or new innovations has been the InfraKit, or then the competitor Civil Point map extension, which is Trimble Connect's extension module. And what they really do for us in construction is that if we wouldn't have, let's say that we don't have these kind of tools, how the workflow would go is that the foremen, they look for the PDF documentations and understand how something is built. Then they will go to the site, command the excavator driver to do his job, and workmen to what they need to be doing this day or this week. And they will go and start building. And then when the surveyor has time, he will come to the site to make new markings that, okay, here is the new road. And he also measures the what we have built this far. And then he takes all these materials in his computer, makes as-built images, and then sends it to the foreman. So foreman, when the job is done on site, he doesn't know immediately that is it built as the accuracy requirements. So, for example, in Finland, our accuracy requirement for the cut layer is that it cannot be any centimeter too shallow, but it can be 10 centimeter deep, deeper than design has planned it. So that's something that with machine control systems, they have been using it and getting onto that accuracy, but still the information, because it's in a format that only surveyors understands and surveyor softwares understands, they really haven't had any knowledge of, okay, how much did we build wrong, or what is our quality for the site? Do we need to something fix some areas of it before we start building the next layers of different materials? Because again, that's much cheaper than realizing it too late. But again, when we have a tight schedule on our projects, we don't have time for that. So this InfraKit and the map extension has provided this kind of like much closer real-time visibility of at what quality we have been building, and also the progression of how far we are right now. So if there's foremen, of course, knows exactly where we are, but then the office employees who are doing those quality documents and everything else, they may not know so well, but they still need to build the other documentation regarding different topics. So I think that really has made the big change that we have. We now have tools that we can have more seamless and real-time understanding of the current state of our projects with the quality measurements, with the location-based documents, with the easier visualization and management of our construction designs in BIM models. And then the InfraKit specialty is that we can send the models to the machine controls directly. We don't need any third-party tools. We just need that software, and then the InfraKit go and picks up all the log points from the machines and portrays them on the map. That what is the measurement difference between the target layer, what we got from the designers, and our layer where we build.
And what sort of saving in time and cost has that enhancement made? Because when you described the first scenario where somebody had to manually translate a PDF information into a set of work instructions, go to somebody, get them to do some work, then send a surveyor out and go measure the work, and then come back to the office and try and translate that into some as-built information, and then send it off to somebody else to document the progress. And now you've streamlined that. And would you say, have you saved like 10% of time, or 20%, or 100%? Or
I mean, if we look something like 5 years ago, or maybe even longer, but let's say reference point for 5 years, I think the project progression time has shortened maybe 15 to 20% in like most projects, not every project, but the most projects. So it really has come much more faster. And then also I think if we look on the savings, I think the big issue on before BIM-based production in construction was that we couldn't build once and then it was done. It was perfect and we don't need to revisit because, again, there's so much running costs, so we need to build as fast as possible and go, while we get the results of our quality on the later. Now when we have more real-time based practices, we can make sure that what we build is really high quality, and we don't need to visit that place again anymore.
And do you need fewer people? Did the previous process use 100 people and now you use 80 people or something like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the country itself. Like in Finland, there has always been a very low amount of people per site. Let's say that we have a 40 million highway road project for us. So we, at the peak time, we maybe have 70 people on the site. And when it's not the summer, then there's something like 30 or 40. So it's really like we never have had a lot of people on the site, and it's the way of building has always been that we over-resource things. So if we need 2 guys, we get 1 guy. If we need 3 guys, we get 1 guy, hopefully 2 guys. And that's the way it has been done. Long hours and long weeks, but that's the life of main contractor.
Okay, but you've saved money and you've saved time, and you also said you're not redoing the work, so you're saving having to do work and then do it again because you did it incorrectly, and potentially using less people. So it seems like there's a lot of benefits, which maybe haven't even been measured. Like maybe nobody sat down and said, well, we've saved this much time, we've saved this many people, we've saved this much cost on not redoing it, not doing the work twice or 3 times even, just do it once. Does your company measure those kind of things?
Well, I mean, the risk that never realized those things are really hard to track or measure. But I mean, like, because the new digital tools has allowed us to really decrease the risk of our projects, like, tremendously. We have much more control of how we are building, how our processes are. It's getting more closer to the, like, more structured construction, like building construction. That has, like, minimized our risks greatly, which has allowed us to then do things or bid much more cheaper and win more projects. So yeah, there's definitely like cost savings, but the measurement is quite difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. Look, we're coming to the hour, but before we go, I wanted to ask you one more question about your book, the BIM Kit. Tell us a little bit about why you produced that book and what's the key message.
Yeah, sure. So it's as I earlier, or the start of this podcast episode, spoke about that my work basically is to go to the sites and do the BIM adoption and utilization and train the people. And the BIM Kit focuses on the change management part, so how you really can find the steps to make it as smooth adoption as possible. Because again, if you just bring the BIM-based tools on the site and give a 1 hour training for the site crew that, hey, this is how it works, and go with it, it's the adoption don't go there. It's you need to tie down the process itself and the practices and the use cases and so on. So it's focused really heavily on the change management and the BIM adoption or BIM implementation for your sites.
Excellent. So here, John, just before we close out, did you have any last questions or comments or?
No, Ralph, I don't. I found the conversation really insightful because from my perspective, I think open standards drive innovation, and it's been really interesting to get a deep, a view of the Finnish construction and infrastructure development industries and how, the success of their adoption of BIM has driven innovations, digital innovations, physical innovations, and there at the end, it's really, really great to hear about the cost benefits and value that investment in open standards has had for Jero, the infrastructure industry, and the wider Scandinavian region, it seems. So, yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jero for coming on. It's been, as I said, a really great conversation, and I look forward to further communication with you, Jero. Also, I'd like to make you aware of the AECHive.net platform. It's a great place to talk about new innovations that you're working on, and really engage the community around those. So, yeah, I'll include the link to the BIM Kit for anyone that's listening and wants to read your book and more on what you've been talking about.
And also from my side here, it's like fascinating. It's just so interesting to hear about people who are making these innovations and making these changes in a practical way and, bringing about improvements. Because at the end of the day, that's what innovation is about. It's about bringing improvements in the way we do things, and the success stories are fascinating. So from your side, is there any last word or words of inspiration or encouragement you want to offer the community before we close the call?
Thank you, John and Ralph. No, I would say that's just that it's a long road ahead with the implementation and adoption of BIM and BIM-based tools, but I really encourage the software vendors and people who are building business for BIM to go forward and do as much as possible, because I think it's emerging technology and there's a lot of low-hanging fruits in every sector of AEC industry right now.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, and we really appreciate it, and we'll love to keep in contact with you and keep talking on the AEC Hive platform. So thanks for your time.
Definitely. Thank you so much.